Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Division III February webinar. I'm Louise McCleary, and today I am joined by Tiffany Alford. She's an Associate Director in Academic and Membership Affairs. And then Katie Mucci, our Assistant Director in Governance, will oversee the Q&A today, the chat. So if you have a question as we're going through the next 30 minutes, please type it into the chat and we will do our very best to answer all of your questions as time allows. So the agenda today is covering quite a bit, and you can see it on this slide and the next slide, but really these are all the things that were either discussed at the Management or President's Council meetings or during the convention, such as the issues forum or the business session. And then after we do the Division III specific, we'll make sure to give you some association-wide updates. So as I mentioned, we only have 30 minutes. We're going to give you a lot of information, though. And again, we hope to hear from you and to be able to answer your questions. As a reminder, this PowerPoint is located on ncaa.org on the Division III webinar page. There will also be a recording of today's webinar that will be added by the end of the week. So let's get started. So most of you know that we have been doing a review of our philosophy statement. So last summer, at the urging of the Management Council and our Advisory Council, our President's Council tasked Strategic Planning and Finance with overseeing a review of the division's philosophy statement. What we have learned since last August is that there's confusion. What is the philosophy statement? And I want to read just one thing to you to sort of set the context for this review that's been going on. The philosophy statement is a governance document, and that articulates principles that represent a commitment to the Division III membership and serves as a guide for the preparation of legislation for planning and implementing programs. So keep that in mind as I talk about this review. So Strategic Planning and Finance created a working group as it's mentioned there, at the urging of the President's Council. And after several meetings, they created and distributed a survey to the membership. That survey ended up having 1,200 responses. So if you go to the next slide, Katie, you will see, as it notes there, that from those 1,200 responses, the majority were mostly in agreement with a draft proposed philosophy statement. That's also, you can click it in the PowerPoint to see what that draft looks like. So what we did then is all of that feedback was used at the issues forum during the convention. And we asked the 1,100 delegates in the room to really have roundtable discussions on 3 areas. One of the areas is, should athletics be primarily an undergraduate experience? That's the first bullet point. The second one was around broad-based, and really the feedback and the conversation is, what does broad-based mean for our members? And then the third area was, should athletics be financed and staffed and controlled similar to other departments? So if you were at the convention, you saw the polling questions, you participated in the polling questions, everybody in the room had that opportunity. But I think what was even more important is that we had 75 table facilitators provide their feedback back to staff. What we've done is we've created an executive summary of that feedback, and it will now be shared later this month with the Philosophy Statement Review Working Group. They'll look at it. They will continue to make tweaks to that draft philosophy statement as needed. They'll provide updates to both Management Council and President's Council during their April meetings. And then we anticipate that they'll probably seek some additional membership feedback before they send their final recommendations to the councils during their summer meetings. At that time, it will be up to the Management Council and ultimately the President's Council to determine if they will be forwarding a 2024 legislative proposal to change our philosophy statement. So that's the timing. This is what we have done. what we did during convention, and what we will be doing over the next 4 to 6 months. So we'll go to the next slide. So during the Management Council meeting, they had a chance to talk about championship updates. And again, a lot of the things that our Management Council continues to talk about goes all the way back to the 2022 membership survey. And so some key things that the Championships Committee will continue to do. Again, I think most of you know they recommended about $3 million worth of championship enhancements to be implemented this year. That was approved by Strategic Planning and Finance as well as the councils. But they're looking to say, okay, our next budget cycle is in FY25. What else could we look to do to enhance championships? As you see on the slide, there are quite a few areas that they're looking at. They're looking at selection criteria and bracketing. Should we increase bracketing most specifically? The other is, should there be more flights allowed in the first round of competition to protect higher regionally ranked seeds? That's something that we've heard as a concept. And then other things that we're looking at is, should we continue to find ways to increase funding to close that gap of expenses when teams do go to championships? So those are three big buckets. The Championships Committee is meeting right now. They're discussing those areas plus some additional areas around the student athlete experience. I anticipate that they'll send out some type of survey to sport committees, to commissioners, a copy to athletic directors to say, okay, here's some possible areas for us to have enhancement. How do you rank these different areas so that they can be fully informed as they make those recommendations next year to be possibly implemented with the FY25 budget? And then another area that they continue to look at, or how do they help better prepare our site representatives and our first and second round hosts to make sure that we're providing the highest quality and most memorable experience for our student athletes. So Katie, on the next one, also during the council meetings, Management Council and President's Council heard a recommendation from the Administrative Committee. And really, with the current unstable landscape in higher education as well as college athletics, the Administrative Committee recommended to President's Council the creation of a financial and risk management working group, which was approved by President's Council. And at the moment, this working group will have the members of the Administrative Committee on it. So that's the chair and vice chair from President's Council as well as Management Council, plus the most tenured president on Management Council. So it'll be those 5 individuals, but then they'll also solicit other individuals who have expertise in risk management to serve on this working group. And then what they will do is they will meet periodically. They'll work in tandem with Strategic Planning and Finance to look at the divisions, the risk, the threats, and the opportunities. As they identify those, they will advise President's Council, who will ultimately be responsible to look at those and make decisions on how to move forward to make sure that we continue to keep Division III strong and healthy as we get through these uncertain times.
So the membership ultimately voted on 10 proposals at the 2023 convention. This slide and the following slide show each of those proposals along with the following vote on that proposal. I won't go over each of these proposals in detail, but instead I'll highlight a few of them that might grab your attention more immediately. The first would be the 2023-3 proposal. This was actually the mental health hardship waiver resolution. It requested that the governance structure collaborate and establish a hardship waiver process for mental health to include its own waiver criteria that's separate and apart from a physical injury. This resolution had an immediate effective date, and the governance structure will begin working with entities within the national office to help move that process along and get started with the research there. 2023-5 is related to a committee composition, and this proposal is adjusting the composition of 6 designated governance committees to provide One, consistency in the size and regional representation of the designated committees, and two, a student athlete voice on those committees where such representation is not currently present. This proposal has an August 1st effective date, and we will work to make sure that those changes are implemented. And then finally, on this slide, I would point out proposal number 2023-7. This is the council composition proposal that ensures that each Division III multi-sport conference will have one representative on either the president's or management council, and that the conference's slot on either will alternate accordingly. The nominating committee will be in charge of coordinating those nominations. This proposal has an effective date of August 1, 2024, so next summer. Next slide, please, Katie. Proposal 2023-11 eliminates the weeks in our playing season, so restructuring the playing season for all sports except for football by eliminating the use of weeks as a required measure for defining the seasons, increasing the non-traditional segments, and providing access before or after the season for designated winter sports. This legislation will go into effect on August 1. And then finally, the other proposal I'll point out on this slide is one that was overwhelmingly supported by our membership, 2023-15, which eliminated the requirement for active member institutions and active conferences to submit a comprehensive self-study guide at least once every 5 years. This had an immediate effective date, so if you had been waiting to do your ISSG or CSSG, as of the date of the business session, you no longer have to do that, so congratulations. All right, the council supported forming an advisory group to support NCAA staff as it develops a federated process for playing rules. The new NCAA Constitution includes a provision that allows each division to establish the rules for sports competitions and participation with flexibility at the division, subdivision, or federated level. The Playing Rules Oversight Panel, better known as PROP, is expected to recommend in April that divisional governance bodies pursue the appropriate legislative actions to eliminate the requirement that playing rules shall be common for all divisions. The advisory group, which consists of one member from the Division III Championships Committee, one Division III Athletics Director, one Division III Conference Commissioner, one member from the Division III Management Council, one Division III member from PROP, and one member from the Strategic Planning and Finance Committee.
To the association-wide topics that were discussed during the January convention. So of late, Division III, as well as the association, has sent out quite a bit of information regarding the Board of Governors Congressional Engagement Subcommittee. At convention, if you went, you had a chance to listen to the Board of Governors chair talk about college athletics and really the threats that we're facing right now. And those threats are coming from two areas primarily. One are state laws that vary from state to state. Think name, image, and likeness. What we've also started to see just in the month of January and now into February are 3 state laws around revenue sharing. They all vary. At the moment, they're all directed towards Division I institutions, but as we know with name, image, and likeness, it morphed into impacting all members of the NCAA. So that's one area. The other area are lawsuits. We have lawsuits particularly around health and safety, think concussions. And then we also have some current lawsuits around saying that student athletes should be paid to play. Again, there is not a certainty that those lawsuits are going to be only for Division I. So knowing that, the Board of Governors created this subcommittee. And they said, all right, if we have these threats, really every time the NCAA, we have new rules or regulations, many times it ends up in a court case. So who could help us? And after their extensive research, they felt that the best group to help us was Congress. And really to ask for help in 3 areas that are identified on the slide in front of you. One is around state exemption. Instead of having 30 different states with different name, image, and likeness rules and policies, can we get an exemption from that and have instead a federal set around name, image, and likeness? The same would apply if there were different states that came out with revenue sharing. The other is to have some guarantee that student athletes would not be seen as employees of institutions. As you can imagine, not only would that be incredibly difficult for Division I, it would be almost impossible for Division II and Division III members. So having that protection is important. And then the last area is around having a legal safe harbor. At the end of the day, the NCAA wants to be able to govern itself, wants to be able to have our rules and regulations without worrying that every time there's a new rule or regulation, there also could be a lawsuit in it. So those are going to be the three asks. So what we have started to do, and we will send this out to Division III tomorrow, from Mary Beth Cooper, who is the president at Springfield College, and she has served on this subcommittee since its inception, as well as from the chair of our President's Council, say, okay, Division III membership, here's some talking points around this. What are the threats and what are the asks? And really then the next step that we're doing is we're identifying ambassadors and advocates throughout the division to be able to assist President Cooper, as well as assist our President's Council to say, if this is what's in front of us, how as a Division III should we engage the rest of the membership to make sure that they're tracking on these important issues and threats? And how do we best reach out to Congress to make sure they understand not only what might be the threat to Division I, but what's the threat to Division III institutions, and how can we work together to get some protections for the NCAA? We anticipate having some listening sessions with the membership that we'll schedule over the next couple of months. But I did want to let you know that tomorrow we'll be sending out talking points in this space. We continue to look, as I mentioned, to get some advocates to assist with this effort, but more information to come. If you did not have a chance to go to convention or you did not have a chance to go to the State of College Sports, in the memo that will be going out tomorrow, there is a link. It's also on ncaa.org right now. It's about 11 minutes of that update that President Livingstone gave that really highlights what's in front of us and how the Board of Governors believes that we can address it.
We will actually reverse a little bit. I just got a question that would go to Tiffany. Tiffany, will the playing and practice season tool be updated to reflect new legislation?
Yes, we are working on all the resources that are on our pages that relate to the playing and practice season or any of these other legislative updates. That may be something that we talk more about at Regional Rules, so I'll plug Regional Rules. But yes, we are definitely going through all the resources that are on the site, and we'll make sure those things are updated in advance of our August 1st deadline.
Thank you. And we can get back on track with you, Louise.
All right, well, let's go to the next slide, Katie. So at the Board of Governors meeting in January, Competitive Safeguards asked the Board of Governors, and it approved to repeat phase 2 of the transgender policy. There was just too much uncertainty with phase 3, and so Competitive Safeguards thought it would be best just to maintain the current phase 2 of the transgender student athlete participation policy. Again, there's a link in the PowerPoint if you need to make yourself familiar with that policy for next year. So the earliest phase 3 might begin would be in 2024-25 academic year. The last bullet point you see there, this is something that continues to be a political hot button. There are 18 states right now that have signed bills banning transgender student athlete participation. Another 30 have introduced state laws. I don't anticipate that going away. As I said, this appears to be politically motivated. We're marching towards the 2024 elections, but it's something that the Board of Governors, yes, we are following phase 2 of the transgender student athlete participation, but there's a commitment there to say if student athletes are following that policy and they have qualified for a national championship, they have every right and will be welcome to compete at those championships. So I just wanted to provide that update. And then my last update before we take your questions also from the Sports Science Institute, what they have looked at is we used to have 9 priority health and safety priority areas, and they've revised those priority areas. And so they've revised it to focus on physical and mental health and promotion, sport-related injury and illness, performance and training readiness, and then education and policy. And so what they felt is having those 4 broader areas allowed them to be more nimble as they're providing education and resources to the association. You see there was a cannabis summit that was held in December. And the reason why is both Division III and Division II, we test for cannabis at our championships. The question was, should we still be testing? And really what the Sports Science Institute said is before we change that testing policy, let's make sure we fully understand the use of cannabis and also the impact of it. So they invited membership experts to discuss trends, ways to address, and ways to educate the membership. And so stay tuned. We expect resources to come out of that. And ultimately, we may also see something come before the Management Council to no longer have that testing in our championships. And then the last is relatively new, wearable technology. Competitive Safeguards is exploring how this technology is currently being used on campus. I expect future updates to come to the councils. I don't know if by this April, but definitely by this summer and then into next year as well. So Katie, we did a lot during convention. We went over that very quickly. I think the most important thing is that we brought the delegates together in person for the first time in a couple years, fully in person, I should say. We had a very complicated legislative agenda. A huge thanks to Tiffany, all of her AMA colleagues. The business session went incredibly smoothly. All questions were answered, voting worked, and so in that ways, I would consider this year's convention a tremendous success.